Alrighty, so I'm gonna go over some of the, the linebackers and the defensive linemen today for the in-house stuff. Stephen Weatherly is the first, for sure, defensive lineman we have as a, impending free agent, as he is an unrestricted one. So, what Weatherly was able to do, he had 5 hurries, 6 quarterback knockdowns, 14 pressures, he had 3 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for loss, 14 solo tackles with a combined 24 tackles on 420 defensive snaps, which is 38%. And the reason why I said he's the first, he's the only, for sure, impending free agent we have, is because Everson Griffin has an option. And if they don't pick him up, obviously he's a free agent at that point and is free to sign with anyone who he likes to, sign with. He had 13 hurries, 13 quarterback knockdowns, 35 pressures, 8 sacks, 24 quarterback hits, 11 tackles for loss, had 26 solo tackles and 41 combined tackles while playing 848 of the defensive snaps, which is 78%. So, with Griffin, if we want to go more detailed into this option thing, I fully expect Minnesota to decline the option, despite, there are some people who would think, well, it's Everson Griffin, why would you not pick up said option? Well, because they're negative $5.4 million in the cap, and this is a $13.9 million option. So, declining it actually gets them roughly $7 to $8 million in cap, I think. And, yeah, that's helpful. But I'm not going to rule out a return to Minnesota for him. He is one of the leaders of the team. He's been on it since, he got drafted there in 2010. So, him coming at a cheaper price, that's not $13.9 million a year. Well, I mean, even against the cap, wouldn't surprise me, but we'll see how it shakes out. If he thinks he's still worth top dollar, if he is, he probably isn't returning. But if he's okay with taking pay cut to stay, I could definitely see it potentially happening. Weatherly, I think, would be keeping around as is a rotational piece, because especially if you do end up losing Griffin, obviously now you have the money to re-sign some people, and Weatherly could be a guy to help replace Griffin with him and Odenigbo. So, and the 14 pressure mark really isn't that bad, given the fact that he had 38% played on the snaps. So, yeah, I think he's definitely worth keeping around as a rotational piece, pending on the price. I don't think I'd go over, like 2.5 a year for him at all. But I don't think he should cost more than that, and I think that's kind of the max. So linebackers. The two we have is Kentrell Brothers and Eric Wilson. Now, Eric Wilson's a restricted free agent, so we got some fun stuff to talk with him. And Kentrell Brothers, he did play some linebacker. 10 solo tackles, 16 combined tackles, didn't have a tackle for loss. He was targeted 13 times, allowed 11 receptions for 82 yards. It wasn't really great there. Although he wasn't allowing that many yards per completion, really, at 7.5 and 6.3 yards per target. He was blitzed twice. Nothing came out of that, and he didn't miss any tackles. Eric Wilson, he played a lot more. 32 solo tackles, 57 combined, 6 tackles for loss, allowed 18 of 25 targets, 138 yards were given up, 7.7 yards per completion, but only 5.5 yards per target. He was blitzed 15 times, didn't get any hurries, but he got 5 quarterback hits, 5 pressures, 2 quarterback knockdowns, and 3 sacks, and he only missed 2 tackles on the year. And the quarterback rating against them both, Brothers was 92.6, and Wilson was at 91.4. So brother's core special teams player. Could be someone the Vikings keep around just because it looks like Curse wants out and you don't want to lose that many good special teamers because that's a very underrated part of this game. And if you start struggling there, then all of a sudden you get turnovers, things like that. And, you need to keep that safe. So I'd expect him to be probably one of the first guys they hammer out just because, well, he should be on a really cheap contract here. And he's kind of important to the whole core special teams. Wilson would be a no-brainer to keep him around because I think he's a solid linebacker, especially coming off the bench. But once again, we can't do this without talking about the fact that Minnesota has no money, and with a negative $5.4 million in cap, which, once again, don't worry, I made a video in the past that's like there's fairly common sense moves that can actually fix that. But even then, with Wilson being a restricted free agent, he has to kind of be tendered is a thing, unless you want someone else to set the market and then they can match it. And those tenders go as follow. There's a first-round tender, which is $4.6 million, a second-round tender, which is $3.2, and an original round tender, which is $2.1 million. So it's going to be, given how the cap is, I think it's going to be very hard to see Minnesota actually do this. Because usually you see them hit with a second-round tender because usually it's a fairly cheap contract at $3.2 million against the cap, and usually teams aren't willing to give up a second-round draft pick for a guy like that, and that is true. That's very true. Look at Anthony Harris. That's what he was hit with, and now we're in an unrestricted free agent thing. But given the fact that Minnesota has a lack of money, and even if they are able to create space, which they can, but it's going to be hard to field a team behind it. So is paying $3.2 million for a player who is primarily a backup player really worth it? I don't know if Minnesota's going to see it as a big priority to keep him around given that. And that they could just wait for someone to give him an offer and see if that's any cheaper than any of those, and just be like, all right, fine, we match it, bring him back that way. Yeah. So your comments down below, nicely helpful there, and liking and subscribing, also very helpful. So please do that, and until next time, I bid y'all adieu.